The primaries are in full swing. People are out talking to the press, and I've noticed a couple things. And one of the things I've noticed a lot is that conservatives tend to think that the radical left, or the liberal left, whatever you want to call it, is a bunch of communists. And that's just not the case. But Trump is out there saying, the radical left, we need to save America from the radical left and all that kind of garbage. And while I don't agree with him on that particular point, I do think that I do enjoy watching the press lose their minds, because the deplorables, quote unquote, the working class people, people who, the guys who run the New York Times, not the guys, but the people who run the New York Times, look down on. And it's very obvious, and we're going to get into it a lot. So before my camera starts going out again, let me go ahead and get this kicked off here. So this first segment I have for you involves Roseanne Barr. And I just want you to, I happen to catch this. Well, okay. Let me stop. Let me stop there. Let me stop and rewind a little bit, because I am getting ahead of myself. So there's clearly a populist sentiment in politics right now, as you can see by Trump winning. And it's so evident when you watch the press trying to push people like Nikki Haley and DeSantis, anyone but Trump. It's clear that they have kind of lost their mojo, and that people do not give a shit what the press thinks about anything, because despite the years and years of anti-Trump propaganda, he's winning big. And there's so many aspects to this, so many different angles, but all in all, I see it as a very good thing. And based on a lot of the reporting on the ground I saw Keaton do, and I've seen others do, when you talk to a large portion of the Trump supporters, they're not bad people. They're made out to be bad people because they're not doing what the press wants them to do, which is, get behind their sanctioned candidate. And the money is always there. I heard one of the guys saying how he's seen a zillion Nikki Haley ads in New Hampshire leading up to this. And people are just wise to that. Once they see, I know for me personally, when they run ads, I see the ads and I'm like, okay, whoever's spending a bunch of money on these ads, I'm going to vote the opposite of them, or I want to find out what they're spending, why they're spending it, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, on that note, that whole populist revolt note, I wanted you to see this clip about Rage Against the Machine, because it's a good way to kind of kick this segment off, and just listen to what this guy says. It's a short clip and we will discuss it.
Its greatest era of all time, and they don't even know it, and they're too stupid to capitalize on it. Like, all of their lyrics apply to the progressive left, to communism, to what's going on in the world, and then these people come out and stand with those same people. It makes them look like clowns, and it exposes that they were never really about that shit anyway. It was just marketing. Dude, if Rage Against the Machine came out right now and said, dude, we're with the people, this is crazy, they'd be the biggest band in the world, but they won't do it because they're a bunch of sellouts.
So I think he's right generally with that sentiment. Not that they're sellouts, but I think what happened is the propaganda around someone like Trump over the last couple of years has been so strong. It's convinced people like Rage Against the Machine and the Dead Kennedys that you need to rally behind the Democrats, who have typically been, the party that panders to, racial minorities and LGBTQ community and all that kind of stuff. How much they've delivered for those people is another story. What I will say is a lot of their push for policy for those groups is completely, performative based, because the best way to help all of those groups would be to, pass Medicare for all, because minority groups, white people included, are suffering because of high healthcare costs. But, again, this guy gets into the whole if Rage Against the Machine would speak out against the progressive left and the communists, as if that's the problem right now. And this framing, I talked about this in the last stream, but the neocons and the Republican Party, the thought leaders, if you will, in the Republican Party moved into the Democratic Party under Trump, because someone who is going to dismantle the administrative state and not be drop us into every war that they want was a real threat. And there's so much proof of this that I've gone over time and time again, which I won't go over again here. But the idea on its face is a ridiculous one. And so I thought this is from Roseanne Barr's podcast, and she's talking to Kash Patel, who worked for the Trump administration. And I thought this was good for a couple reasons, but let me just play it and we will discuss.
Now, come on, not just me, but everybody, you too, all of us. And then to have this fantastic victory that we all believed in and pulled for in Iowa, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, look, I think what you saw is tragically a weaponization of the justice system and law enforcement community to target a political opponent. And all the neocons saying it's a right-wing conspiracy and that Donald Trump's a Russian asset, we disproved that with the truth, exonerated Trump, and we showed that the DOJ and FBI unlawfully, illegally surveilled a political opponent. So anyone that thinks that that can't happen in modern day America, you need to recalibrate what news system you're watching. And when you fast forward to Iowa and all the disinformation campaigns they've put on and all the arrests that they've put Donald Trump through, I think what you saw last night, the resounding thumping that he gave to the rest of the candidates, doubling up on them combined, shows that Americans are listening. It's not a right-wing conspiracy theory. They are trying to take away our right to vote, and the DOJ and FBI and state law enforcement authorities are trying to rig presidential elections because they don't like Donald Trump. And America is just coming back swinging. And I can't wait for the rest of the state.
See, again, this gets caught in a very partisan light because he's assuming that started with Trump when we know that it didn't. They took out Bernie Sanders twice. Obama, when he was kind of an insurgent, I don't know, like people forget that Hillary Clinton was supposed to be the president in 2008. She did her time in New York as a senator. She voted for the Iraq War. She did everything that the, political establishment would ask of someone. That's why Biden's in there. And she didn't get it. Obama was the insurgent. Well, once Obama got in, my big issue was healthcare. And then there was like a public, there's going to be a public option, but then Lieberman killed it. Obama ended up doing Mitt Romney's healthcare plan, so the right-wing healthcare plan. So, the idea that election rigging just started with Trump is a joke at best. It's been going on for a long time, but I think now a lot more people on the right who are pissed off enough to do something about it are affected by it now. I think that's the big difference between the Trump and the Sanders movement. Is Trump is a figure who has the balls and the resources to oppose the people that are, trying to take him out, where Bernie Sanders just kind of tucked his tail and, okay, my good friend Joe Biden.
I can't wait till they get to Nevada here, my home state, in a couple of weeks. We're ready.
Well, it's just such a, everybody was calling it the Great Awakening for the past, I don't know, what was it, Jake? How many, 6, 7 years since?
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking, let's just go from 2020. Let's go from election day 2020, the trauma we've all been under, those of us who are whatever you're going to call us. I don't even want to use any of their words. They're all irrelevant. But we were all calling it the Great Awakening for so long. And everybody's saying this Iowa, what it proved.
Isn't it ironic how she's talking about, isn't it ironic? I need to get a sample drop of that. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think, Alanis? Anyway, Don't you think it's ironic she's talking about the Great Awakening? Meanwhile, her arch enemies are woke people. You know, like basically the same thing, but in a different partisan, you know, through a different
Cash,
partisan
you
lens.
tell me what you think of this. It's the end of the Great Awakening and the beginning of.
Look,
what do you think?
I don't think you're wrong. And all you have to do is watch MSNBC or CNN. I'm not advertising that you should do that, but it's comedic.
Oh wait, we got some good MSNBC coming up for you.
And when you have people like brainless Joey Behar or whatever her name is, Reed or which one, I can't remember. They all bleed together, saying that somehow the victory is because Donald Trump's a racist. You see how far they're reaching. When you get the Georgia prosecutor showing up to church and saying she broke the law because she's a black woman and she's being attacked. You broke.
I think Jimmy and Due Distance covered this, but that it was kind of funny to watch Joy Reid claim that Nikki Haley lost in Iowa because she's too brown. Meanwhile, Nikki Haley was the governor of South Carolina, like one of the most whitest Confederate conservative states in the union.
The law because you're a corrupt prosecutor and you belong in prison. Playing this race card is a tired, hackneyed old trick of the media. But when they go to it, you kind of know the message that Donald Trump.
You know what's funny? Again, these people sometimes, and I don't know Cash's position on this, but playing the phony race card. Have you seen all the anti-Semitism shit going on? And they will not, these people will not see that parallel at all, which is crazy to me. You know, it has to do with the tribalization of political takes. But again, it's like, here he is talking about the weaponization of racism. And then I'm sure, you know, Roseanne gets into it on this about, you know, how I don't think she's one of the people backing the anti-Semitism stuff, but she's very obviously got a right-leaning view on the whole conflict in the Middle East.
Put forward is winning the day. The next narrative they're talking about already, literally like hours after Iowa, is Donald Trump's going to be a dictator. He's going to seize the media, excuse me, the military. Based on what precedent is that going to happen? Donald Trump, as I remember when I was chief of staff for him at DOD, is the one that authorized the National Guard, and Pelosi and Bowser shut it down on January 6th. If I had 10,000 guys in uniform like Donald Trump wanted, there would be no January 6th. So the only people that want the insurrection narrative are the radical left-wing agenda. And so when CNN is he's going to be a despot, he's going to be a military dictator, you're talking about the guy that ended the forever wars, protected our troops, sealed our border, took on Iran, destroyed terrorists, and brought home American hostages. And
yeah, but
so this is the thing too, that when you listen, the more I listen to Trump talk, the more it's comedic and almost endearing. The way everything he did is amazing. I saw some footage of him this morning talking about when he was president, and it's just funny. He's like, well, yeah, we had the best recovery.
What they do, remember, 101 of Marxism is blame your opponent for what you do, and that's what they did. Like when they said he's working for Russia, right?
Marxism. That's the thing. And I covered this in the last stream. The stuff the Democrats are doing now is neocon strategy, because all the neocons are Democrats now. So they're using, and they've got people like Roseanne here convinced it's the Marxists and the socialists. No, these people are extreme capitalists, crony capitalists. They've got you know, at home with Marxist and communism up in your dome while they're robbing the shit out of you through capitalism. So
that's because they was working with Russia, selling our plutonium over there, saying, oh, Donald Trump, you know, he's working for Russia. Then, you know, while they were weaponizing the.
By the way, I just want to clarify. The only reason I use the term dome is it was kind of like a subtle reference to this rapper I love, Mr. Liff, and he had this song called Home of the Brave that came out after 9/11. One of the few rappers who actually called out like that whole thing on a hard basis, but one of the lines in that song, he goes, they're killing several birds with one stone while you're at home with anti-terrorism up in your dome. So anyway, sorry, I'm a corny white guy.
FISA courts, you know, they talked about him being, you know, when they were spying on a sitting U.S. president, which that's treason. Hello? They're talking about him committing
See,
treason.
she's right
in a
about
phone
that.
call.
She's right
They
about that. The stuff that they did to Trump, can you imagine if they had done that to Obama, if Republicans had done that to Obama? And when you read into the Mueller indictments and everything, this is what I think is so astonishing about the whole Trump smear campaign is a lot of my older liberal friends still think it's a real thing. But as soon as you scratch the surface on any of it, it falls apart. One of the people they relied most heavily on in the Mueller files or the report or whatever was this guy Konstantin Klimnik, who was actually a State Department asset, a known State Department asset. Anyway, let's keep listening to Roseanne.
always tell you what they're up to when they
With-
accuse you. So now when they're accusing him of he's going to be a dictator, it's because Biden is a GD dictator.
She's right. I could not agree more. And again, that is not a Marxist tactic. Marxist tactic. I got my hand covered over here. That is not a Marxist tactic. That is a neocon tactic. These are neocons, not Marxists.
Throwing his opponent, arresting his opponent, using his DOJ to arrest people for walking in the garden near the Capitol building on January 6th. What's that but a dictator?
Look,
am I right?
That is their theme. That is their playbook. They have the mainstream media to carry their disinformation campaigns to say Donald Trump is a dictator. Donald Trump's MAGA America movement is full of treasonous, seditionist conspirators. Donald Trump's movement somehow is the one that hijacked the DOJ and FBI. But in reality, as you pointed out, they have. Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and Chris Wray have arrested thousands of people baselessly for their free speech conduct in and around January 6th to do two things. One, kneecap Donald Trump's movement, and two, to allow the mainstream media to puppet the disinformation campaign that somehow Donald Trump committed insurrection.
Right.
Because
watching Keaton from Due Dissidence in New Hampshire this morning and at Dean Phillips' rally and Dean Phillips talking about the horrors of J6, I wanted to, it just made me want to punch things. It's like, it was like watching a substitute teacher tell a story that is completely fake to a class of just like drooling imbeciles. Anyway,
what we're seeing is Donald Trump is defeating them in the courts, rightfully so, because he didn't commit insurrection.
That's right.
And now
Thank
they're
God.
moving to the narrative to say, well, he can't get him in the courts, so we'll just say he did it, and then he's going to be a dictator. But what you have is the biggest civics lesson, in my opinion.
Okay, sorry to keep cutting in here, but I have to say, Donald Trump had a very good opportunity to be a real dictator when the COVID stuff happened. He could have locked down, he could have put the country on martial law. He literally had that opportunity, and he gave it to the states. He gave it to the states. During that time, I traveled to Salt Lake for a funeral. Utah handled it way different than California did, and they honestly got through it quicker and better, and their economy didn't suffer like ours did. So this idea that Donald Trump is some fascist dictator, listen, he panders to the fascist elements of the right that I can't stand. The religious right. But he's clearly not one of them. He's a New York cosmopolitan dude, Anyway, let's keep listening.
Going on in modern American history, led by Donald Trump. He's showing Americans that
Yeah.
Chris Wray's FBI is targeting houses of worship. He's showing Americans that Merrick Garland's DOJ is coming after you if you dare to be pro-life.
See, and that's the thing. Again, it gives this whole thing makes me wonder if it's an op to drive the country further right, because because the Democrats are in control, you can blame all this terrible shit that's going on the left when it's not the fucking left. Okay. It is not. Joe Biden's administration is not the left. I'm sorry, Republicans, but it's just not. It might be, in a propaganda bubble where there's these red and blue teams, but in reality, where you actually examine the facts, it's not.
He's showing Americans that if you free speech
That's right.
advocate for Donald Trump, the FBI is showing up at your doorstep after they unlawfully surveilled you.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this is getting out
Ask
there.
Matt Taibbi.
And also,
Well,
don't
the IRS
forget,
with him.
they're showing us too
Listen.
that the people who come and surround our house and threaten us and maybe light it on fire or kill a few of our neighbors in their mobs and gangs, their street gangs, like Hitler had his brown shirts, it's exactly the same.
See, again, I played this clip last week of David Frum saying flat out that the quote unquote Antifa people were probably undercover cops. No joke. And the people like Roseanne and Tim Pool think that those are leftists. The black people, the people in the black that show up and break windows and stuff, they think those are the left. And that's what she's talking about here. It's ridiculous.
They all get off. They kill a kid and they get 6 months. I mean, that's part of the story too. It's so pre-war Germany, and I'm Jewish, and
Both sides are just calling each other Nazis. How does our political debate just degenerated to two far right parties? I mean, you cannot argue that Biden isn't far right when you see what's going on in the Middle East. Two far right parties calling each other Nazis. That's American politics right now.
I grew up with survivors, in my grandma's apartment house there in Salt Lake City. So I studied this my whole life, and I am not going to be silent while I watch it happen here. Definitely not. And it is happening here. And, they don't like Jews, of course. So they're,
Okay. Again, the idea that the Democrats don't like Jews is frigging hilarious. Have you seen MSNBC, Roseanne? Have you anyway, I'm sorry.
they bring in Jew haters from all over the world. Oh, come on in, because they're setting us up for something really horrible. And
Yeah.
when I say Jews, I mean all people of faith, because they don't like none of them. They don't like any religion. They don't like Christians. They don't even like Muslims, even though a lot of them say they are, but they're a particular kind.
So I got to give Cash credit here because he kind of
they don't like none of us who believe in anything but the state, because they're horrible communist, Stalinist, fascist. They're every ist that there is, and they are all working together to get America, because we are their target. We are their target. We are targeted.
We're not just targeted by, we're targeted by the deep state.
There we go.
Of bad actors in government, along with their conspirators in the media.
See, he sets her straight. So cheers to Cash for setting her straight. Because it's, again, just like I said, this ain't the left.
Media. This is not a coincidence. Every time they roll out a campaign to target Donald Trump and his movement, it has been methodically thought through the senior leadership levels of the FBI, DOJ, the intelligence community, DOD, and we catch them every time. The first time we caught them, everybody was like, no way, not in modern day America. Now we're on Russiagate like 27.0. And they're going to come up with 4 more versions between now and election day, because we are going to continue to defeat their disinformation campaigns. And so what we have to do, and I think the reason your show is such a wild success, is because people have stopped watching the hot garbage on the TV and started to tune into places where you can get the actual truth, where you can educate voters to say, hey, this is not the time to say, I told you so. This is the time to say, remember that 51 Intel letter where you were lied to by your government the week before the election? Those guys are putting in play this next disinformation narrative about insurrection and dictatorship. Those guys are the ones trying to seize your right to vote freely for Donald Trump or anyone else for that matter.
Or who?
I wish I would have clipped it, but I was watching some footage earlier of Trump in New Hampshire. I think it's on Forbes YouTube channel. And someone asked him if he thought Nikki Haley should drop out. And he said no. He said, no, I think I would never tell anyone to drop out. I think they should run. She is running a good campaign and everything. He was very conciliatory and very democratic about it. On the other hand, you have people in states like Colorado flat out just saying, no, we're not going to let anyone vote for you in the name of democracy. So I want to show you, just having this point home about the Democrats. This is who the Democrats really are. They're not communists. Joe Biden's paid speech buoyed the GOP in Midwest battleground. Imagine that, would you? Let's talk about it. I just took a couple of snippets from this. I'm not going to read these full articles. I don't want to bore you with all that, but check this out. Joseph R. Biden Jr. swept into Benton Harbor, Michigan, and this is from January 23rd of 2019 during the 2020 campaign. 3 weeks before the November elections. Talk about uniparty. In the midst of his quest to reclaim the Midwest for Democrats, he took the stage at Lake Michigan College as Representative Fred Upton, a long-serving Republican from the area, faced the toughest race of his career. But Mr. Biden was not there to denounce Mr. Upton. Instead, he was collecting $200,000 from the Economic Club of Southwestern Michigan to address a Republican-leaning audience, according to a speaking contract obtained by the New York Times and interviews with organizers. The group, a business-minded civic organization, is supported in part by the Upton Foundation. So there you go. There's Joe Biden helping the Republicans in the last election. And then I just wanted to show you this real quick. PolitiFact, you know PolitiFact too. It's not like they're like a right-wing, bastion of truth or anything. But, of course, when you read into this, the framing of it is a lot. They soften the blow quite a bit in how they frame it, but the headline alone is a good one because it just says Joe Biden, I was labeled as one of the most liberal members of the United States Congress. False. They didn't even give it one of those half true ones. They just labeled it flat out false. So, again, the idea that the Democrats are communists or even on the left is hilarious because they're not. They're just not. So let's move on to our next piece of joy here, our next segment. It's about MSNBC, the Microsoft neocon bullshit channel, as I like to call it. So I have a couple of pieces of tape to roll here for you, but this is in relation to Rachel Maddow, my former hero, and I know a lot of people like me who were Rachel Maddow. Her show was so great because she was such a wonky person who would go into the weeds and read the article and like talk to an author who wrote a great article about some pressing issue, and I always really respected her until the 2016 primary, when it became clear that policy didn't matter to Rachel. The genitals or the gender of her preferred candidate was the most important factor at play. And she began obfuscating and propagandizing on behalf of the DNC instead of supporting Bernie, a guy whose actual, ideals aligned more closely with hers, or at least the ones that she claimed to have, So I just want to start by showing you this, and you've probably seen it by now, but just to recap, this is them talking about Trump's Iowa win and why they can't show
remarks.
Interject. I'm sorry, I just have to do a little bit of business just for a second. At this point in the evening, the projected winner of the Iowa caucuses has just started giving his victory speech. We will keep an eye on that as it happens. We will let you know if there's any news made in that speech, if there's anything noteworthy.
So just that attitude right there is why the media is failing. We will let you know if there's anything newsworthy there. We'll tell you if there's any news in that speech. You don't need to worry about it. We got you. We're going to let you know.
Something substantive and important. The reason I'm saying this is, of course, there is a reason that we and other news organizations have generally stopped giving an unfiltered live platform to remarks by former President Trump. It is
because we're lying and trying to create a narrative that he doesn't help us to weave.
Not out of spite. It is not a decision that we relish. It is a decision that we regularly revisit. And honestly, earnestly, it is not an easy decision, but there is a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things. That is
Rachel Maddow's like the Obama of news, right? Like she's just like a really polished liar, someone who says things in really big words and like has these really well-formulated statements that are flat out lies, but they sound like they're not, because they're so well structured and intelligent sounding. Literally the Obama of news.
A fundamental truth of our business and who we are. And so his remarks tonight will not air here live. We will monitor them and let you know about any news that he makes.
Right. So most people, if you're not a Trump fan, it's unlikely that you watched Trump's speech. So let's play a little bit of it just to show you what a dangerous, disgusting man he is.
Well, I want to thank everybody. This has been some period of time, and most importantly, we want to thank the great people of Iowa. Thank you. We love you all. What a turnout, what a crowd.
Was that a call for insurrection?
I really think this is time now for everybody, our country, to come together. We want to come together, whether it's Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative. It would be so nice if we could come together and straighten out the world and straighten out the problems and straighten out all of the death and destruction that we're witnessing. That's practically never been like this. It's just so important. And I want to.
Aren't you glad Rachel and MSNBC protected you from this terrible, disinformation-laden pro-Russian speech? I mean, I know I am.
Make that a very big part of our message. We're going to come together. It's going to happen soon, too. It's going to happen soon. I want to thank some of the great people. We have so many senators. If I go through every name, we'll be here all night, and everybody's going to get angry at me. But the senators, the congressmen from Washington, they came down from all different states. I want to thank you very much. I want to congratulate Ron and Nikki for having a good time together. We're all having a good time together.
Good time together.
And
yes,
I think they both actually did very well. I really do. I think they both did very well. We don't even know what the outcome of second place is. And I see Carrie Lake. Congratulations, Carrie.
So anyway, you get the idea. It was a very hate-ridden, disinformation-laden speech that MSNBC needed to protect your ears from at all costs, as you can see. And this is why people are losing trust with the media. So keeping on our MSNBC role here, let's see how they're trying to spin this, because I think, basically what they do is they show you, they pick and choose what they show and don't show you. The news, I don't think the news necessarily lies. They lie by omission. They leave important things out. They leave important pieces of information out on purpose. So watch this. This is fantastic.
Give us your input on what happened in Iowa last night. And
just to set this up, Jim Messina, this duck lips guy here, he looks like he's got like sausage lips or something. He looks like one of those caricatures of like those cartoons that, I don't know if it was Disney or Looney Tunes, but the cartoon gangsters in like the 50s and 60s, where they'd have these like really dark, like sausage-esque lips. And this guy was one of Obama's messaging guys. So, I mean, take what you will from that.
As it pertains to a potential Trump-Biden matchup in the fall.
Well, look, I think a couple of things are really interesting. First, Joe, like this enthusiasm number for the Republicans, 14% total turnout of Republican voters in Iowa, I think is a really startling number.
Hey, Jim, how many Democratic voters turned out in Iowa? Riddle me that. Oh, none did, because you didn't have a primary, you sick.
I think if I was the team Trump, I would be worried about this. He was supposed to be this guy that motivated everyone. The second is, like, DeSantis's performance was ridiculous. I was talking to a Republican operative who reminded me that DeSantis went to all 99 counties, and every time he did, he ended up sliding in those counties. He did worse in the counties as they saw him more. The more they were exposed to him, the worse he did. You and I have talked about this in the past.
See, the Democrats have it good right now because all the neocons have comfortably moved over there, all the permanent Washington people, and they can play this look at the bad people card even though they are the bad people.
This is a guy who just isn't ready for prime time. And now, what's the rationale for his candidacy? Like, what do people now believe? He was supposed to be the Trump alternative. And the truth is, the more people see that alternative, the less they want him. On to the general election.
Well, also, something this guy misses out, and DeSantis is out now, so he obviously took this guy's advice, but people want something different. That's why Bernie Sanders was popular. People are tired of people like you, Jim, telling us who we can and can't vote for. And that's what the media has done. I remember in that Democratic primary that Biden won, there was this point when Chris Cillizza was the guy's name. He worked for CNN, and he's like, here's the candidates to watch. Guess who his top two picks were? Kamala and Joe Biden. And so when it got to the point where people like Bernie were winning the primaries and people that weren't, and Biden did poorly until Super Tuesday when the DNC coalesced around him and Obama put a bunch, came in and came out of hiding and told everyone to go away. But this idea that you guys get to choose or tell us who's okay to vote for is why people don't want to vote for someone like DeSantis or Nikki Haley. Because I guarantee you all the support Nikki Haley has is very weak manufactured support that she's gained through ads and all the money that's being flooded into her campaign by the uniparty donors who, just want another Biden-esque puppet in there. Can you imagine if the election is Biden versus Haley? Oh my God. I've said this before. It's the same two people. She's Biden in a dress.
And Jim, can I really quickly, before you get to the general election, can I say now, and again, Donald Trump could not have paid for a better result last night if you look at Haley splitting. But you are right. A low turnout.
So this is the thing too I noticed about this conversation is you watch these uniparty cats, they're all gonna rally behind Haley. That's another reason DeSantis got out. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on them. They're like, look, you're splitting the anti-Trump vote. You need to get the F out of here and let us push Haley through to the finish line. I guarantee you that's what's going on. And good on DeSantis for, getting out and endorsing Trump.
Not a lot of enthusiasm for Republicans. A third of Republicans.
I really think before I keep this going, I really think DeSantis saw Vivek do that and went, oh, that's what I got to do. I really do think that. I think Vivek was very smart to do what he did because he sets himself up to be the heir to Trump now.
Saying they loathe Donald Trump in the polls. He doesn't get half of the Republican vote. This is no huge vote of confidence for Donald Trump, but the way DeSantis and Haley chopped each other's support in half, very good for Donald Trump. Now Nikki Haley goes to New Hampshire, probably overperforms there. You've got Ron DeSantis. He's going down to South Carolina. And what is Ron DeSantis going to be doing in South Carolina?
These people would have no lives if they couldn't talk about this inane bullshit. Like they know something, like they have some unique knowledge of this, of elections and politics that the average person doesn't. And, I can't wait to show you this Bill Maher stuff. It gets even better.
Out there for a month, and he's going to go and campaign on vets and military issues, which, of course, will gut any support that Nikki Haley may have had with those groups. So we're going to probably see.
Here's these guys acting like they know something. DeSantis ducked out like a couple days after this aired.
In South Carolina of these two cutting each other in half and Donald Trump just gliding through.
Oh, I think you're exactly right. What the Republicans desperately needed from last night was an alternative to Donald Trump, and they just didn't get it. For the second cycle in a row, 2016, they tried to make it a choice between Trump and someone else. They couldn't do it. Now, Joe's exactly right. They can't do it now. They're going to go into South Carolina, into Super Tuesday.
Public is wise to your game.
Seeing the anti-Donald Trump vote split, and Trump's going to walk into this nomination. I mean, what I learned last night, Joe, is that we could just stop pretending Donald Trump's not going to be the Republican nominee for president.
Yeah.
He is. Yep. I think it's depressing.
Well, what's funny is they're not pretending he's not going to be. They're already running against him. It's really all they have. I mean, Biden gave a speech. Trump hasn't even won the nomination yet, and they're already running against him. So watch this. This is some more MSNBC commentary from Claire McCaskill, and we'll get into why she sucks as well. But watch this.
Caskill, though, first, want to get your take on what you saw last night.
Yeah, when you want to know what's going on in politics, of course you go to Claire McCaskill.
Not a big surprise. Donald Trump won by about the margin that most people expected. Low turnout. And as we've been saying all morning, almost half of Republican voters voted for someone other than Donald Trump last night, which is pretty stunning statistic when you consider he was president of the United States and sort of.
That's how they're going to try to spin this. Almost half of Republican voters voted for someone that wasn't Donald Trump. Almost half. Yeah, well, more than half did vote for Donald Trump, buddy. And that's a majority.
A de facto incumbent in some ways here in the party. What are your takeaways from the...
At no point do they talk about why there wasn't a Democratic primary here either, because then they would have to go into the weeds and talk about what happened the last cycle when they tanked Bernie with their fake app.
Result last night.
Well, first of all, 50-50 for an incumbent really sucks. This is not good for Donald Trump.
Not good.
I don't care how they spin it. I get it that he won more delegates than the other candidates, but he got 50% of the vote in his own party after being an incumbent president. As you guys have said, that's not good. And then think about the money that was spent and how much of it was spent on negative ads.
Okay. This is where it gets really good.
$70 million was spent by DeSantis and Haley, only $11 million by Trump. Of that,
did you hear that?
Almost half of
so he won. He didn't even have to spend money. He won without even spending very much ad money. They spent 70. They outspent him by 6-1.
By DeSantis and Haley, only $11 million by Trump. Of that, all that money, most of it was negative ads against DeSantis and Haley. No negative ads against Trump. I mean, there was no negative ads against Trump, and he still only.
Wait a minute. She just said that 70 million was spent by DeSantis and Haley, but most of the money was spent on ads against DeSantis and Haley. So they spent money on ads against themselves? Is that what I'm supposed to believe here?
Managed 50% of the vote. Can you imagine having an election where your opponents refuse to run a negative ad on you? It's crazy. So this, all the Democrats need is for an aggressive campaign to make sure that our base stays together, that everyone understands what's at stake.
My God, these people are so out of touch. Their base is already not together.
That women of America understand what this man did to our freedom in this country, and to grab that 25 to 30% of the Republican Party that said last night very clearly, nah, I don't really want to go there. I don't believe that all this evidence in courts of law has been made up. I don't believe that he won the election. I think he's not a good idea for our country. So I don't think it was that great a night for Donald Trump.
And you know, if anyone knows anything about politics, it's Claire McCaskill, the lady who was voted out, in fact, by her constituents. Republican State Attorney General Josh Hawley defeated Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill in Missouri on Tuesday, flipping one of the nation's most important Senate races to the GOP. Hawley had 53% of the vote to McCaskill's 44%, with 83% of precincts reporting when McCaskill conceded the race. So that's someone who, you know, you really want to pay close attention to when she talks about politics. Let's read a little bit more about this before we move on. Beating back a liberal suburban groundswell that proved lead. This is from November 6th of 2018. So almost 5 years ago. Beating back a liberal suburban groundswell that proved lethal to many House Republicans, Josh Hawley claimed victory here on Tuesday over Senator Claire McCaskill, toppling one of the Senate Democrats' last remaining moderate voices, aka Republican. The Associated Press said. The context was one of the most expensive Senate races in the country's history. Tens of millions of dollars in ads blanketed the state's airwaves, framing the stakes with Mr. Hawley's victory. Republicans completed a rapid takeover of a one-time swing state and padded their majority in the Senate. So they spent a ton of money, just like she was just saying, talking about the ads, and it didn't work. They tried to smear Hawley and he beat them. So their ad strategy even is starting to backfire. And it's hilarious to watch these people, gasp as they lose power. They lose the power that they had, any power that they had. They used to be the kingmakers. And that's why this Trump thing is so damn upsetting to them, because it's just the absolute bare proof that they're no longer trusted. No one believes them. No one listens to them when it comes to politics. So just one last little bit on our MSNBC tip here, just to show you who these people are. I'm sure you've seen this, and it's been debated at great length, but we're going to watch it again real quick. This is well, okay, first of all, let me just show you my graphic here because I think it's beautiful. Joy Reid, the real Joy Shady, with her new Eminem haircut here. So she got into a bout with one of the Liberty moms about book banning. And the reality is, I think that she's drastically overcompensating for something that happened a while back. But let's just watch this real quick, just to refresh your memory. I'm sure you've seen
other
it.
Moms for Liberty advocates have, to decide that a book, an award-winning book like All Boys Aren't Blue, isn't appropriate for students to read. What is your expertise?
What a tragic story of a young man who's anally raped by his adult family.
Joy, let me start this over. What expertise do you have to say that it is good reading for a curriculum in a public school?
That you have and other Moms for Liberty advocates have, to decide that a book, an award-winning book like All Boys Aren't Blue, isn't appropriate for students to read. What is your expertise?
What a tragic story of a young man who's anally raped by his adult family member. So you have incest, rape, pedophilia. Joy, you said you'd let me answer, so I'm going to answer
Please
for
do.
you. In what context is a strap-on dildo acceptable for public school? Just that's my question to you. Tell me what the context around the strap-on dildo or the rape of a minor child by a teacher.
Hold on a second.
No,
wait,
we're talking about public school.
One moment.
All right.
So now you've asked me questions.
Sure.
I'm going to answer it.
Okay.
Well, who is the main character? What's the name of the main
Dun, 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 dun. I just can't get over her
character
hair.
in All Boys Ain't Blue?
It looks like Eminem hair.
Blue.
You're asking me right now.
You just gave me very specific information about this book, so you're presenting yourself as somebody expert.
It's the gentleman.
Hold on. Who's the main character in the book?
The main character is the author.
What's his name?
George.
So here's what thinking people would call a straw man argument, that you don't know the main character's name, so you
believe is his first
because
name?
you're giving me very specific information that is.
You're asking me to remember the name of an author.
You
the
just
name
remembered
of the author
very specific
doesn't
things.
Joy.
Here's my
We're
question.
talking about
Here's my
strap.
question.
You didn't answer my question.
No. I'm going to answer your
Great.
question.
I would love to hear that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know that.
So anyway, I just wanted to drive this point home that I think Joy Shady here is overcompensating for something that happened a couple years ago. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but they found a bunch of anti-gay posts on her blog, and she claimed that Russian hackers did it. And this article is great for a couple of reasons, but let me just read these snippets to you so you can get on to a much better story, which is I won't even spoil it for you. Anyway, short history of blaming hackers for pretty much everything. Joy Reid may have very well been the target of a malicious breach, or she's just the latest person to blame hackers for her past mistakes. It's interesting the level of awareness that Wired has around fake hacking claims when it comes to this, but not when it comes to, like the DNC, for example. Anyway, check this out. The report on the Reid, but let's start with Reid, who claims that attackers not only breached her blog, but also the nonprofit Internet Archive, which maintains the Wayback Machine, a database that automatically preserves millions of web pages to keep them from being lost to history. They did so, Reid says, to insert multiple posts that say things like adult gay men tend to be attracted to very young post-pubescent types. So just to clarify here, her argument is that not only did Russian hackers hack her site, but they also hacked the Wayback Machine that archives her posts as well, somehow. Oh my God. We live in a bizarre world. So to sum there, MSNBC, I'm sorry, guys. You just you have no credibility. Your quote unquote reporting team, people like Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid and Claire McCaskill, hold no sway. You are powerless. You are no longer kingmakers. Moving on to our next segment here. We all know and love Bill Maher, and this is one of those. This is his what's it called? Overtime piece. So I believe that it's public domain and that I can play it without getting a copyright strike here. But there's a lot of good stuff here that we need to discuss. So he has Andrew Sullivan on, who is famously a gay conservative man, and just let's just talk about this. So let's get into some Bill Maher, a little bit of Bill Maher action for you here. You know you want it.
All right, great to be back on CNN. Happy New Year. We've got with us today the guy who hosts MSNBC's Debate with Ari Melber. Ari Melber's over here, and
yeah, you're MSNBC guy. There's that thread.
Okay. All right, Ari, what do you make of the recent study that found that half of inflation in the U.S., oh yes, I saw this, is due to high corporate profits? They're calling this greedflation, which I think is right. I mean, what impact does greedflation have on our economy? Right. So people, you know, there was a legitimate reason why prices rose for a while, but then, of course, they used that as an excuse to raise the prices. Now that stuff is coming down, somehow the prices don't come down too, because the profits are fat now.
Yeah, the price gouging's documented. They brag about it in earnings calls to Wall Street. It's allowed. There are other places that make it much harder. France has rules that actually make this a lot harder to do, but here it's legal, but it's outrageous.
Remember how all this was supposed to happen under Trump too?
And at the time, they're giving themselves big pay raises in the boardroom too.
Well, here's my question: is what do you do about it? I remember two things. Gavin and I talked for a second about jawboning. I mean, presidents did that in the past. They literally just did it by the power of presidential coercion. They got
jawboning. Okay, that's an interesting term, but that is kind of what Trump did with China, the bully pulpit thing. He just got out there and said crazy wild shit that scared people, and now they're kind of like, oh well, you know, presidents can do that. And you know, just as an aside, Bill Maher has good reason to hate Trump. He's one of the few people in the liberal press who I think, you know, Trump sued him for some ridiculous shit, and but I think Bill Maher has been fair with Trump on a couple things despite that. So anyway, let's keep watching. This gets better.
People in the Oval Office, and they said, look, you knuckleheads, you're doing something bad for the country, and sometimes that worked. Nixon, as I recall, maybe I got this wrong, but I think he had price controls. I mean, that's something very foreign. Even I barely remember that we would actually...
It's wild because I watched this thing about Nixon. I actually did a piece on it, and I don't think that Nixon was some hero, but I question the framing of things like this now, because this guy was making the claim that Nixon was run out of office for the Watergate thing. It was kind of a setup because he wouldn't do certain things that the establishment wanted him to do. And stuff like what Bill Maher's talking about here kind of speaks to that a little bit.
Work.
No,
they don't work in the long run.
Right.
Look, the best way to bring prices down is competition, right? So if these companies, if there's a cartel involved in keeping prices high when they should be going down, then the cartel needs to be broken up. I haven't read the study, so I don't know. But
see, he's right about that. I think libertarians are naive in the sense, though, that like, do you really think Google is going to let other competition, like search engines, get into the game at this point? They have a monopoly. They are, you know, they have kind of legally been able to work around things. And don't shut me off, YouTube. I'm just saying. I think libertarians are kind of naive in this respect, where it's like, oh, just competition will fix it. Yes, competition. No, we have competition, bro. Have you seen how that's working? It's not working out too well.
But it's not like inflation hasn't been explained by a variety of factors. Obviously, the supply side stuff, the constrained supply of goods. Then you had the big overspending of the Biden stimulus, which really did. I understand why they did it, and they got a good deal of growth from it. But they did.
Well, some of it
came
Trump.
out in inflation,
Well,
and some of it was Trump too.
Yeah, Trump
absolutely.
Too. Everybody got together.
Why are these people still taken seriously?
They're
saying that inflation is because of stimulus, because the government gave people. At no point do they point, they were just talking about the guys gouging prices at the beginning. So I was going to say at no point do they go to that, but they actually already talked about that. So now it's just, that the government gave people money. That's what caused the inflation. Yeah. Very naive.
$6 trillion to lock ourselves
in.
But
But what's interesting now is the most resilient high prices are.
Like they were literally just talking about how price fixing and price gouging and stuff, and now they're like, oh well, the stimulus.
Right, do it on the national basis. Then no, there's no price.
There are certain products you can't live without. I'm sure if you.
All right, I think
everybody got together to spend $6 trillion to lock ourselves.
I'm glad
if these companies, if there's a cartel involved.
So listen to this. This is actually really good. Bill Maher seems a little red-pilled on the COVID thing. Listen to this.
Prices high when they should be going down, then the cartel needs to be broken up. I haven't read the study, so I don't know. But it's not like inflation hasn't been explained by a variety of factors. Obviously, the supply side stuff, the constrained supply of goods. Then you had the big overspending of the Biden stimulus, which really did. I understand why they did it, and they got a good deal of growth from it. But they did.
Some of it
came out in inflation, and some of it was Trump too.
Yeah, Trump
absolutely.
Too. Everybody got together to spend $6 trillion to lock ourselves in
But what's interesting now is the most.
Everybody got together to spend $6 trillion to lock ourselves in our room.
High prices are of food, right?
Yes.
Is food corporations bragging about this?
Well, yeah, they are in their earnings calls because they don't think they're really going to get heard that much. They're even doing it on diaper sales. And it's not a cartel, but there aren't a lot of diaper providers. So if the three main companies that do it on the national basis, then no, there's no price.
There are certain products you can't.
It's not a cartel, but
live without. I'm sure if you have someone who needs diapers,
they're limited,
either at the beginning or end of life, you definitely want.
Sure.
I mean, like I always hear people bitch about plumbers. They charge an arm and a leg. Have you ever needed a plumber? If plumbers only knew what we would pay them.
Yeah.
When it's coming up through your bathroom. Okay.
So I just want to pause on that because that's Bill Maher kind of giving a shout out to the working class a little bit, the essential workers, the plumbers. But listen to where this goes.
Andrew, this is for you. What are your thoughts about the Pope's recent declaration that sexual pleasure is a gift from God? Thanks, big man.
Sorry, I forgot about this part.
But that pornography must be avoided. Well, that's contradictory. No, I'm kidding.
He's stating actually Catholic doctrine. We're not supposed to hate our sexual pleasure. We're not supposed to. I mean, this is not the case with Protestants, of course, but Catholics were allowed.
Right.
I remember when I first realized I had this between my legs, it was the best day of my entire life. And I never really could understand it as a sin. Masturbation and that pleasure was just something that seemed.
Now, Andrew, I know you're a conservative, but my friend, what is the only reason that gay people have to feel guilt? Religion. There's no other reason that someone who's gay and wants to be with the same-sex person has to feel guilty other than religious bullshit. So I know it's cute that you have this reverence for the Catholic Church still and everything, but they don't have that reverence for you. So
obviously, self-evidently natural and great Why would God be punishing me for it? And I actually, I was very devout. I just decided, well, that's obviously not true. The way I decided that, well, the Virgin Mary wasn't physically ascended into heaven. There were certain things you said, okay, no, that's not right.
I remember when I was first masturbating, and I did not know what it was. We didn't have...
I didn't know.
And I remember thinking, is this bad for me? But then it was like...
Here's the bill for his candor there.
Really, it was like... I didn't know, really. I thought it was urine. I did it in the dark. And the only thing I'd ever seen come out of there was urine.
I know.
And it seemed like, this doesn't seem right, but...
The fact that you remember that moment, I remember that moment too, just shows you how natural it is.
And how naive we were compared to kids today, because I'm sure they know everything before they're 7 years old.
They do, and there was no porn either. Like I used to, honestly, I had a scrapbook. I would draw the dudes I wanted to have sex with. That's all I could do, draw them. But that meant that my imagination was kind of set off. And when I first discovered sex, it was like, oh, this is interesting, that is interesting. Now you meet like someone who's 21, they're like, well, I'd like you to be daddy with a bad report card. You need to be there with a spanker and show up at this flight and wear this. And I'm like, where did you get this from?
Thank you.
It's probably TMI.
Bill Maher gets all like substitute teacher right here.
Gotta remember, we're on CNN, not Club Random.
He didn't say anything out of line.
For panel, who do you think Trump has on his short list for VP?
Okay, this is what I wanted to talk about. So wipe the slate clean on everything.
Oh, Stefanik is the one that was talked about now?
Stefanik.
Isn't that the one that they were talking? She's the New York State, used to be a normal, and then became Trump crazy?
And the tormentor of Claudine Gay.
Yes,
that's what made her famous. That's what makes it.
But I think still Haley. I mean, Trump has teamed up. I think he's teamed up with people who've said way worse things. J.D. Vance wrote a whole book and launched his career.
See, to me, what this conversation kind of lays out is, okay, we're not going to get Trump, but how can we subvert his administration? How can we get someone in there that will do the things we want them to do? His Dick Cheney, if you will. Trump's Dick Cheney will be someone like Elise Stefanik or Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is totally a empty vessel, just like a Biden that can be puppeted to do what she used to be on the board of Boeing. And there's proof that she covered up for, a lot of their shenanigans. So it's interesting to see these liberals talk so fondly of Nikki Haley. I mean, it's not, obviously, because they're all part of the same party, and Trump is a threat to that. But anyway.
Backing Trump.
He doesn't care about that.
He doesn't care about any of that. And Haley, although there are parts of MAGA, as we discussed, that might not love her, if Trump says this is it, and he's very practical, and she would help in the suburbs, which is his biggest general election vulnerability, I think there's a lot of the actual numbers people around Trump who are trying to get him to think about that. And it would probably give him several points.
I saw in the paper this week that he is doing better and did better with college education.
Yep.
I remember when he won Iowa, or was running in Iowa in 2016, and he had that famous line, "I love the poorly educated." Yes. I mean, we can't write this material.
Did he really say that?
You said tonight that it looks like he could get reelected. He definitely could, but he got 3 million fewer votes in 16. He got 7 million fewer votes in 20. And they had bad midterms, and the Democrats have won every state-based special election in the last year. If he's going to win, which he could, he can't run as the 20 or 16 version of him, and the ticket is the first largest way to say to the suburbs, I'm a little different.
The trouble with Nikki is that she made.
I think whoever's advising Trump now must be better. I think Steve Bannon was a good advisor to him, but you saw, I just played his victory speech from Iowa where he said, I want to bring everyone together, liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats. So I think these guys, just like the MSNBC crowd, which Ari Melber is a member of, are wildly misled. They know nothing. They're not experts.
Like the Dalai Lama. I mean, there is not a country she wouldn't invade, not a region she wouldn't bomb. She is the most unreconstructed neocon I've ever come across in politics. And Trump's entire message is, I'm not an unreconstructed neocon. I think the basic...
He nails it. Andrew Sullivan nails it right there. That is exactly, and you can see it in this primary. Now listen to Bill Maher's response. This is just so stunningly inaccurate.
You're parsing, you're giving the voters way too much credit. Like they are looking at neocon versus not. They don't. This is not what they're thinking about.
See, Bill Maher is such a relentless C word that he thinks that voters are just stupid, that they don't pay attention to issues like that. And surprise, Bill, they actually do. That's why Trump is winning. That's why the people are ignoring the media.
I think, no, this is why I get back to the issues with Trump. I think one of the issues that helped him was that people were sick of these wars. And when they have someone that seems like they want to get into more wars, they were not going to like it. It's a big issue.
I don't think voters expect the running mate to set foreign policy. Period.
My response to that would have been, hey, do you remember Dick Cheney?
I don't think they think about foreign policy the hell of a lot, except if the one that they care about now is Ukraine because it's holding up immigration reform. They care about.
See, and that again, this is Bill Maher. Just he watches MSNBC and listens to media people, and that's what they're saying. That's not what's going on. They're not upset about Ukraine because it's holding up immigration reform. The insurgents in Congress were against Ukraine long before the immigration reform was tied to it, Bill. I'm sorry.
This country, what's going on in this country, just the way most people watch local news. They don't watch national news.
That means they don't want the wars, which Nikki represents. That's their
He's
position
right.
on
Sullivan
politics.
is right.
We don't want to have one, really.
But the median Trump voter doesn't think that he's going to take the cues from her on that.
Or that's.
I don't think Ari's wrong about that sentiment, but he's also missing the point. The reason Trump is wildly popular is because he's against the types of things that Nikki Haley stands for. And if he was to pick her as a running mate, it would be a suicide. It would be a suicide move. It would completely tank his campaign, which is, I'm sure, what they want to happen.
Really, the issue they're voting on. Nikki Haley, what is she going to do about Pakistan? I just don't think this is I don't know what to do. All right, I have time for one more. Oh,
you're like, yeah, voters are dumb. Yeah, they're not thinking about that. Rah. Bill Maher knows this airs on CNN, and I'm sure that a lot of the people who want the wars have.
I see they're going after Alec Baldwin again for the shooting at. Is this not the most ridiculous thing? I mean, does anyone think Alec Baldwin purposely shot that person? If not.
He's been going after Trump about being a Russian spy, the most ridiculous thing. Does anyone really think the president of the United States was secretly controlled by Putin? Bill, listen to yourself. Listen to yourself. Defending Alec Baldwin.
If it was an accident, it was a horrible accident. Accidents happen.
And I don't disagree. I don't think that Alec Baldwin intentionally killed someone. But imagine if it wasn't Alec Baldwin who did it. Would that person be in the same situation that Alec Baldwin is, with kind of people just, ignoring it? I don't think so. And just on the end of this, I want to throw in this clip about well, I'm not going to throw that. I'll save that for another segment. Anyway, Bill Maher, wildly out of touch with reality, and just this most smug dickhead I've ever seen. Like, oh, voters don't really care about foreign policies. They're dummies. They don't care. Yeah, this is why you people have been wrong repeatedly throughout the years. And again, why people don't trust you and don't listen to you anymore, because you're not experts. So speaking of people who are disingenuous and fake, let's talk about this interview with Obama that was done by I forget, it's like Decoder or something is a podcast, but basically, I mean, the whole thing is pretty uneventful. Obama's recent interviews have been pretty stale and like, don't have any breaking news in them. But there's a couple things he says in this I want to talk about, because it's kind of evident of the, I guess you could use the term, disconnectedness of the thought leaders of the Democratic
on
Party.
individuals? Do they land on the people making the tools like Adobe or Google? Do they land on the distribution networks like Facebook?
My suspicion is how responsibility is allocated, we're going to have to sort out. I think that...
Okay, hold on a sec. That might be the wrong clip.
Land on individuals? Do they land on the people making the tools like Adobe or Google? Do they land on the distribution networks like Facebook?
My suspicion is how responsibility is allocated, we're going to have to sort out. I think that, but I think the key thing to understand is, and look, I taught constitutional law. I'm close to a First Amendment absolutist in the sense that I generally don't believe that even offensive speech, mean speech, et cetera, should be certainly not regulated by the government. And I'm even game to argue that on social media platforms, et cetera, that the default position should be free speech rather than censorship. I agree with all that. But keep in mind, we've never had completely free speech, right? We have laws against child pornography. We have laws against, human trafficking. We have laws against.
So, okay, this is what I think is interesting about this, because those are clearly not speech-related crimes. Like, you could make a joke about child pornography that has nothing to do with an offensive joke, that has nothing to do with you consuming child pornography. Sure, if people are producing and consuming child pornography, go after them, of course. If you have evidence that they're doing that, yeah, get them. But I don't see how that relates to censorship, because if someone is like tweeting pornographic images of a child, that's evidence. There are laws to prosecute those people. So that line of thinking doesn't make any sense. Human trafficking, same thing. The two examples that he used are actual crimes that if you put something on social media, a video of you doing those crimes, I don't think you should be stopped from doing it. I think it's, hey, here's evidence that this guy is doing a crime. It can be used in court. So this is a really just disingenuous argument he's making here, but let's keep listening.
Certain kinds of speech that we deem to be really harmful to the public health and welfare. And the courts, when they evaluate that, they say...
So why he's making this argument is that they can say, oh, well, speech that defames this candidate for president is detrimental to the public's health and welfare.
They come up with a whole bunch of time, place, manner restrictions that may be accepted.
Like the story about the Hunter Biden laptop before the election. That was a piece of speech that is, because we had to beat Trump. So that's, and it goes back to who decides what is, there's this whole mentality that completely absolves individual responsibility in this equation too. If you're a parent, the government shouldn't be censoring social media if your kids are consuming too much social media. You should step in and regulate your kids' use of social media. So these arguments are just completely straw man arguments.
Acceptable in some cases, aren't acceptable in others. You get a bunch of case law that develops. There's arguments about it in the public square. We may disagree. Should Nazis be able to protest in Skokie? Well, that's a tough one, but we can figure this out. And that, I think, is how this is going to develop. I do believe that the platforms themselves.
Yeah, that case, Obama, set a legal precedent that, yes, even people who say hateful things should be allowed to speak if they're not, infringing harm or inflicting harm on people.
Are more than just common carriers like the phone company. They're not passive. There's always some content moderation taking place. And so, once that...
Yeah, and the reason for that, let's be honest, is not because of your safety. It's because of things like Trump. It's because of a situation where they thought they had that election sewn up, the establishment media, the establishment, the long stays in Washington, and Trump was able to get around them through the use of social media. And this is all well documented. They came out and said it. They're like, we have to stop this from happening again. They put elections under the jurisdiction of the DHS. Look that up. That happened on Obama's way out. His Department of Homeland Security guy put elections under the supervision of the Department of Homeland Security. And so that's why he's making these arguments of, yeah, we've always had to regulate speech. No, not until social media became a threat to power structures did it need to be suddenly regulated so super strongly.
Line has been crossed. It's perfectly reasonable for the broader society to say, well, we don't want to just leave that entirely to a private company. I think we need to at least know how you're making those decisions.
And this is where I don't disagree with them, because a private company can, especially in the state of social media, they have a lot more, they can be a lot more nefarious than a government. There needs to be some level of oversight that says, no, you have to let people speak and then report them if they say something that's against the law or they're doing something to inflict harm. It's getting wrapped up in this legalese for a reason.
Things you might be amplifying through your algorithm and what things you aren't. And, it may be that,
that's it right there. What you're amplifying through your algorithm. They want to make sure that another Trump situation where an insurgent candidate without the money and backing of the establishment can't bust through the ranks and grab power.
We're doing isn't illegal, but we should at least be able to know how some of these decisions are made. I think it's going to be that kind of process that takes place. What I don't agree with is the large tech platforms suggesting somehow that we want to be treated entirely as a common carrier, and
it's the Clarence Thomas view, right?
Yeah, but
I think, right.
On the other hand, we know you're selling advertising based on the idea that you're making a bunch of decisions about your products.
This is very challenging, right? Yeah. If you say you're a common carrier, then
and the advertising is what can be censored. Really, the way it should work is advertisers can say, hey, I don't want to be shown on these accounts that, say things. That's how it's always worked on the internet. I used to work in digital advertising. I used to work in fraud prevention. I used to do all this stuff for a living. So I've dealt with this stuff firsthand. And I used to all the time have to go, scroll through our network of sites and make sure that sites with adult content or risky political content weren't displaying certain brand advertisements. And that is where the censorship should come in. If you're saying something politically that, a corporation that's running advertising disagrees with, they can opt out of running advertising on your thing. It might actually be better for them to do that to begin with, but that's a whole other story. The point is, the defense here is, that we're running advertising on it. Yeah. And they're the ones that are the problem because it's their money that controls the platform. So they should have advertising should have no say over speech. That's the way TV works. That's why during COVID, you didn't see people having, alternative viewpoints on popular television shows like Stephen Colbert and stuff like that. So they're trying to bring that level of control to the internet, basically.
Are in fact regulating them. You're saying you can't make any decisions.
Yes.
You say you are exercising editorial control. They are protected by the First Amendment.
Yes.
And then regulations get very, very difficult.
Right.
It feels like even with AI, when we talk about content generation with AI or with social networks, we run right into the First Amendment over and over again. And most of our approaches, this is what I worry about, is we try to get around it so we can make some speech regulations without saying we're going to make some speech regulations. Yep. Copyright law is the most effective speech regulation on the internet because everyone will agree, okay, Disney owns that, bring it down.
Well, because
this guy is actually really smart. I like this guy a lot. Props to him for,
because there's property involved. Right? There's money involved.
There's money. Maybe less property than money, but there's definitely money.
Well, IP and hence money. Yeah. Well, look. Here's my general view.
Fine.
But do you worry that we're making fake speech regulations without actually talking about the balance of equities that you're describing here?
I think that we need to have, and AI I think is going to force this, that we need to have a much more robust public conversation around these rules. And agree to
He's right about
some
that.
broad principles to guide us.
He's right about
and
that.
the problem is right now, let's face it, it's gotten so caught up in partisanship, partly because of the last election, partly because of COVID and vax and anti-vax.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the previous election where you claim the guy who won was a secret Russian spy.
Proponents, that we've lost sight of our ability to just come up with some principles that don't advantage one party or another or one position or another, but do reflect our broad adherence to democracy.
Democracy, that buzzword. And yeah, Obama and Rachel Maddow have a lot in common. They're very good at making authoritarian things sound flowery and nice.
This is not the first time we've had to do this. We had to do this when radio emerged. We had to do this when television emerged.
But the average person didn't have access to a TV station to broadcast on. This is a little bit different. I know that those previous forms of media can be used as benchmarks or for certain types of precedent, but this is a whole different ballgame.
It was easier to do back then, in part because you had 3 or 5 companies, or the public through the government technically owned the airwaves, and so you could make these.
No, this is the square on my bingo card. If I could get to the red lion case with you, I've won. Right? There was a framework here that said the government owns the airwaves. It's going to allocate them to people in some way, and we can make some decisions, and that is an effective and appropriate speech regulation.
That was the hook.
Can you bring that to the internet?
I think you have to find a different kind of hook.
Sure.
But ultimately, even though the idea that the public and the government own the airwaves, that was really just another way of saying this affects everybody. And so we should all have a say in how this operates. And we believe in capitalism, and we don't mind you making a bunch of money through the innovation and the products that you're creating and the content that you're putting out there. But we want to have some say in what our kids are watching or how things are being advertised, et cetera.
And there it is again. We want to have some say in what our kids are watching. Why does the government need to do that? Barack, you can control what your kids are watching as a parent, as an individual. Where is the individual responsibility side of that? Because even with television, these regulations got watered down over time.
Now, and I was with my family last night, and the idea that the Chinese TikTok teaches kids to be scientists and doctors, and our TikTok, the algorithm is different, and we should have a regulation like China has that teaches our kids to be. It came up, and all the parents around the table said, yeah, we're super into it.
So there's where the liberals or communist thing comes into play, because here's this guy advocating that the US be more like China. And again, that completely jumps the individual responsibility cart there and puts all the responsibility on institutions instead of the parents to regulate what your kids do.
That we should do that. How would you write a rule like that? Is it even possible?
Here's the other thing about it. It's also anti-China propaganda. It's subtle. Oh, China's trying to propagandize us through TikTok. Like they're making us stupid with their TikTok, but their TikTok's smart. That's another side of it. It's like, it's not that simple. And it's not, people want it to be this good versus evil battle all the time. And it's really not that simple.
First Amendment?
Well, look, for a long time, let's say under television, there were requirements around children's television. It kept on getting watered down to the point where anything qualified as children's television, right? We had a fairness doctrine that made sure that there was some balance in terms.
Ronald Reagan got rid of that.
In terms of how views were presented. And I'm not arguing, good or bad in either of those things. I'm simply making the point that we've done it before. And there was no sense that somehow that was anti-democratic or it was that squashing innovation. It was just an understanding that we live in a democracy. And so we kind of set up rules so that we think the democracy works as better rather than worse. And
we live in a capitalist oligarchy, so we want to make sure that the people who control things can keep that control despite the democratization of information via the
Everybody
internet.
has some say in it. The idea behind the First Amendment is we're going to have a marketplace of ideas, that these ideas battle themselves out. And ultimately, we can all judge better ideas versus worse ideas.
Not that we shut down ideas that we find scary or incongruent with our frame of reality.
And I deeply believe in that core principle.
Good.
We are going to have to adapt to the fact that now there is so much content, there are so few regulators, everybody's can throw up any idea out there.
There it is.
Even if it's sexist, racist, violent, etc.
Yeah.
And that makes it a little bit harder than it did when we only had 3 TV stations or a handful of radio stations or what have you.
Control the narrative.
But the principle still applies, which is how do we create a deliberative process where the average citizen can...
We can still maintain control, but give people the illusion that they're actually have a platform that is free speech related.
Hear a bunch of different viewpoints and then say, you know what, here's what I agree with, here's what I don't agree with, and hopefully through that process we get better outcomes.
So he again, he's so good at dressing things up in a way that sounds good and intelligent and well thought through. But I just want to end this piece here by kind of showing you some data I thought was interesting. So I don't know how much you know about the Obama Foundation, which is what Obama currently does for a living, but they are worth $143 million something as of 2019, just revenue, and then endowment. I mean, it's worth over $500 million. The Obama Foundation, right? So then it gets even better when you go to their website and you start looking at who gives them money. And then it becomes real evident, why Obama talks the way he does. So, just look at this first slide. Here's just a quick run through of some of these donors here. Jeff Bezos, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. What else we got here? The Parker Foundation. Who's over on the other side? A lot of these names I don't recognize, but they're probably, I'm sure they're great people. Nothing against these people here. But here's this next slide too. Just it gets even better. And I just took 2 quick shots here, but check this one out. So this one we've got Pritzker Trauber Foundation. I assume that's the guy who runs Chicago, the Pritzker family. Silicon Valley Community Foundation, the Boeing Company. Let's see. Oh no, Exelon Corporation. Fidelity Healthcare Service Corporation. Yeah, so a lot of good stuff here. They just Walgreens over here, Warner Media, so you kind of where Obama's coming from, right? So he's got a lot of big donors on hand that he has to speak for out there. That's a lot of money, $500 million in the Obama tied up in the Obama Foundation. All right, so our last segment of the night, I just want to show you this clip just to sum everything up so well that Gleen Greenwald just did a great takedown on the legacy media. And just listen to what he has to say here because it's fire.
It continues to be the single most important fact of American political life that the largest portion of American voters in recent American history, if not ever, no longer trust any of the core central institutions of authority and power in the United States. And that is, if you think about it, an extremely poor state of affairs for any society. We need reliable and trustworthy institutions to administer the law, to create the appearance that the law is being administered fairly and equally, to issue decrees in times of war or in times of medical crises that people can place their faith and trust in, and just in general to have a working set of facts that are given to us by the media that we believe are true. The citizenry needs that. It benefits from having a set of institutions that it can trust. And by and large, in American history, people have largely supported those institutions, whether they identify as Republicans or Democrats, whether on the left or the right. Obviously, there are lots of exceptions. There's been distrust in American history, but in general, the vast majority of American citizens have placed their faith and trust in leading institutions of media, of law enforcement, of science and health, and that has all collapsed. And it collapsed more or less coinciding with the emergence of Donald Trump, though I don't think he was the cause of it. I think he was one of the people who first perceived how great of a sentiment this was in the American populace, and he gave voice to it. He became what he said he wanted to be, which was the vessel for the forgotten person, the person who perceives that these institutions have abandoned them, that they only care about a tiny sliver of the population. Now, one of the remarkable things about 2024,
they care about the sliver of the population that donates to the Obama Foundation.
and the presidential race that we just started with the Iowa caucus last night, is that we have a situation we have never previously had in American politics, ever, in the history of this country. The candidate that is leading essentially all polls, but now I think it's safe to say he is the front runner for the presidency, is not only facing 4 criminal processes, separate cases in 4 separate jurisdictions where he's accused of felonies in each and every one of them, but he has been formally indicted and faces the very real prospect of prison, not 10 years from now or 5 years from now, but this year. These cases are going to trial. And they're not going to go to trial until many of these states have voted. And what it looks very likely, based on the results last night, is that we're going to have a situation where huge numbers of people, millions and millions of millions of Americans, by a very large margin, are making very clear, crystal clear, unmistakably clear, that the person they want to be their president is Donald Trump. And after months of watching this, Jack Smith and the prosecutors in Atlanta and in Manhattan are going to march into courtrooms and they're going to argue that that same person should be put in prison. If there's any recipe for unrest, civic unrest, I can't imagine what would be better, if that were your goal, than watching all these races and all these elections and hearing the outcome of all these people going to vote and then taking the person they want to make their president and doing everything possible to imprison him and kick him off ballots and render him ineligible to run. I actually watched that happen in Brazil twice. In 2018, when Lula da Silva was the front runner in polls and he was arrested and made ineligible, and that's what paved the way for Jair Bolsonaro to win that race. He might have won anyway, Bolsonaro, but the polls were showing Lula in front. And then once Lula won, ever since that election, Bolsonaro being his main political opponent, he has now been declared ineligible to run in the next election, and they're trying to imprison him as well. And it's a recipe for extreme unrest. We saw a little glimpse of it in Brazil. We've seen a little glimpse of it in the United States with January 8th in Brazil, January 6th in the United States, but so much worse will come if we continue down this path. But the remarkable part about it is that even though he's been indicted 4 separate times, he not only is maintaining his political support, he has clearly increased it. He has clearly consolidated all the support he had and then gained more.
And this is what Bill Maher and the people that weren't Andrew Sullivan at that table do not understand.
And if you think about what that says, what that necessarily says, it is actually kind of frightening if you care about political stability in your country. But it's also very well deserved. What it's saying is that we know that the Justice Department and various prosecutors are accusing Donald Trump of being a felon and are trying to put him in prison. But it doesn't affect our opinion of him and his fitness to be the president because we don't trust those institutions to administer the law. We don't believe in the Justice Department. We don't believe in the FBI. We don't believe in prosecutors in this country. We believe that those institutions of power have been weaponized, have been commandeered, have been corrupted. And there is no way to read the outcome of this election thus far, even last night's vote, which you can dismiss as being a caucus, only one state, which is Iowa, all that.
Which MSNBC did.
It's true, but Trump didn't even win Iowa in 2016. He was over 50% of the vote. He won by 30 points, even though tens and tens of millions of dollars were first poured into Ron DeSantis and then into Nikki Haley. It did nothing. People have tuned out establishment voices. That is the only conclusion you can reach. And if you're like me, and you believe those establishment sectors and those establishment institutions are deeply corrupted, then in one way you should be celebratory about that fact, that they really have lost the faith and trust of almost everybody other than partisan Democrats, the only ones who trust these institutions. But if you also value civic stability and just a general peace in the body politic, it should be something very concerning. Generally good.
So this last clip I'm going to show you, they know.
If you go back really not that long ago, as I say,
a Wall Street Journal reporter basically telling you they know what Glenn just said.
we owned the news. We were the gatekeepers, and we very much owned the facts as well. If it said it in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, then that was a fact. Nowadays, people can go to all sorts of different sources for the news, and they're much more questioning about what we're saying. So it's no longer good enough for us just to say, this is what happened, or this is the news. We have to explain our working. So readers expect to understand how we source stories. They want to know how we go about getting stories. We have to sort of lift the bonnet, as it were, and in a way that newspapers aren't used to doing, and explain to people what we're doing. We need to be much more transparent about how we go about collecting the news.
Lift the bonnet. I like that analogy because it's just is great. It juxtaposes with how outdated the legacy media is in general, and they know it. Just like Glenn said, they've lost all credibility with the public, and they're not the gatekeepers anymore. So I'm really happy about that. And on that note, I'm going to wrap this up because I'm going to catch due dissidence, as I'm sure a lot of you are too. All one of you that are watching. No, honestly, thank you so much. If you tune into my streams, I appreciate it. I do these whenever I can. Eventually, I would like to get more consistent, but I'm going to take you out tonight with a little comedy song I put together from a while back. It's the Liberal Boogeymen remix, Rachel Maddow edition. I hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you in the comments, or I'll see you next time. Take good care of yourselves, and we'll talk soon. We will talk soon. Stay woke, all that good stuff.
If you go back really not that long ago, as I say, we owned the news. We were the gatekeepers, and we very much owned the facts as well. If it said it in the Wall Street Journal.
Truly random rally on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A rally in support of Russia, I guess, given all the Russian flags. At least a rally against the U.S. supporting Ukraine in trying to stand up against the Russian invasion of their country. This was a tiny event. It was small. It was a weird assemblage of Americans. There were Proud Boys there. There were Proud Boys there. The anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists. Tucker Carlson. Cryptocurrency promoters. There were a lot of people with Russian flags, also the occasional flag of the former Soviet Union. There were anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists, a lot of them. It was a really weird group. It was a small rally and a weird one. But that's what it looks like. That's the assemblage of short straws and split ends and loose change and loose electrons that's advocating in this country that Russia's in the right in this war and America should be on Putin's side as he keeps invading other countries. There were anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists, a lot of them. There were Proud Boys there. anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists. Tucker Carlson? There were Proud Boys there. There were Proud Boys there. People with Russian flags. There were Proud Boys there.